Joining us now is Saba Ahmed, who made headlines a couple of weeks ago when she was at the Benghazi panel at the Heritage Foundation, and the controversy that arose from that, which we've certainly covered on this show, and many other outlets covered it as well. She's also a Republican Muslim activist. Saba, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me.
It's good to have you on. So first, I want to situate this conversation by giving
I look forward to.
Sorry.
I look forward to sharing my insights, and I apologize that your voice is breaking up, but I will try my best.
How is this now, Saba? We could call you right back if it's a problem.
This is fine.
This is fine. Okay. All right,
yeah.
Then let's go. And if there's any problem, just let me know, and we'll reestablish the line.
Okay.
Look, before I want to get into some questions, broader questions about how you kind of reconcile these identities and what your conception of the modern Republican Party and how being a Muslim would fit into that. Certainly this show has a very progressive perspective, and part of that is definitely being cognizant and aware of Islamophobia domestically in the United States, and then how that actually overlaps with problems in U.S. foreign policy. So we've covered what happened to you at the Benghazi panel in that context, but we've also, had some critical questions that I want to get to as well. But before we get to all of that, I want to give you a forum to just kind of briefly explain what brought you to the Republican Party, what speaks to you about it, and how does that align and complement your identity as a Muslim American?
Sure. Well, first of all, I was a Democrat for several years, and I was very active in Democratic politics in Oregon. And I decided to become a Republican after I ran for office. And it was primarily because during the campaign I was constantly asked about candidate positions and during candidate debates and questions. And I found it very hard to justify a lot of the Democratic Party platform values because they conflicted with my religious beliefs. And
would you get specific about that, Saba?
In terms of specifically, it was hard to justify the pro-choice stuff. Mm-hmm. It was the LGBT. I mean, some of the things were so fundamental to religion. A lot of people ask me Islam says this. Why are you advocating this? And then I did a lot of soul searching afterwards, and then I kind of, at least from the basic perspective, I just thought it aligned better with the Republicans, even though it was not exactly a very welcoming experience in the beginning for me. And even to this day, we continue to have our challenges within the Republican Party. But generally, I feel at least Islamically, the values in terms of the pro-life, the pro-business, pro-family values, traditional marriage, that sort of stuff aligned a little bit better with the Republican Party platform.
Right. So, and we're going to get more into that. What about, but following on your thinking and the issues that you value. So, sure, I would imagine if you're not a supporter of marriage equality, and you don't support reproductive access, and you're, I think being business friendly, I think that gets very ambiguous what we actually mean by that and how that's defined. But obviously, that's certainly, at least rhetorically, a strong part of the Republican rhetoric and framing. How did foreign policy and issues ranging from Guantanamo to drone strikes fit in? Because I would imagine being sensitive to those issues having a lot of dissatisfaction with both parties and both, certainly Bush and Obama administrations from the perspective of those issues.
Of course. I mean, that's my main, I'm very passionate about national security issues. Mm-hmm. That's been my issue because I feel like a lot of the anti-Muslim rhetoric has translated into domestic and foreign policies that have been hurting our economy, our country. And I think it's if we just kind of started talking to each other, we would solve a lot of problems. Muslim Americans have generally been sidelined and demonized, and for a long time, like even prior to 9/11, a lot of Muslims were Republicans, but a lot of them switched or stopped getting involved in politics because of the negative targeting of our leadership. And so obviously, like you just maybe have heard about the NSA surveillance and targeting for the last, like, 2001 to 2010. And, I mean, even now there's a lot still going on. I mean, even though President Obama changed, it didn't change the people who were running the counterterrorism operations. A lot of the stuff is still the same. And I just feel like we need to be able to have a very basic perspective. We never diagnosed the problems. Like, root causes of terrorism were never addressed. If there was ideological differences, we could have addressed them through moderate Muslims, which are like 99% of peaceful people. And we've been living in this country for a long time, and I think we should have been, like, involved in those policy discussions. But sadly, we were, like, kicked out, or, for whatever reason, we were never on the table.
So I just have to say, sorry, go ahead, Saba, complete your thought.
So I just hope that, the reason I got involved more in the Republican side is because I feel like I'm usually the only Muslim there, first of all, in a lot of Republican circles, and I just feel like I'm the only one speaking to the Republicans about national security issues from a Muslim perspective. And I just hope that, I think we need to work with both parties, obviously, but I think Republicans really do need to have a voice from within as well to address this.
Yeah, and I when you said that 99% of Muslims are moderate, it was really hard for me to not break into my Brigitte Gabriel impression, but I restrained myself because I thought that might be traumatic for you to hear. But
Sure.
It's a pretty good impression, actually, I have to say, if I say so myself. So that all makes sense. So this is where, though, there's a number of things you mentioned that I think, this is where I have a critique and concerns about how this has played out. So when I first saw that video of the Heritage Foundation, I mean, it's shocking and it's appalling. And frankly, I mean, if you have, any familiarity, which I'm sure you do, with Frank Gaffney as an example, or Brigitte Gabriel, you know that, it's an industry of peddling conspiracy theories. It's not just a debate about particular foreign policy methodologies, which is problematic enough. But it's also, Huma Abedin is a secret Muslim Brotherhood agent. President Obama is putting Muslim seals on podiums at the State Department or the White House. I mean, it's very demented, very conspiratorial, very bizarre stuff that comes out a lot of these places. And frankly, I would expect nothing else at a Benghazi panel at the Heritage Foundation. So I think in some respects, I mean, it was appalling, but it was in no way surprising. So I kind of wanted to get, your sense of what your actual surprise level was, because to me, it was entirely expected seeing that clip. And then I guess,
for me, it was really odd because I didn't actually expect that type of reaction. Like, really? I have been to so many conservative, I've been to Heritage panels before too, and I've been in DC for about a year and a half, and I regularly go to think tank events and sometimes ask questions, and I've never been personally attacked in that way. Like, I've may have had tough answers and stuff, or people who have avoided to answer the questions, but just never had that type of a response. But at the same time, for me, it was a first time experience because I had heard so much about Bridget Gabriel and Frank Gaffney, and I actually that day, it was such a last minute issue because I had some other friends that wanted to go, and I was like, no, I won't be able to go, and it was very last minute that I was like, I had another meeting canceled, so then I was like, okay, I will go attend. And then I went there, and then I was just like, from the moment I walked in, Bridget Gabriel was so upset seeing a Muslim there, and I just was like, I knew something was going to happen. I just had that
70%. I'm sorry. I couldn't resist. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, anyways, so yeah, but and then I was like, okay, well, and then the whole time, like, I just feel like they were talking. This conversation needs to happen. They're always blaming Islamist terrorists for all our problems, and so apparently, but we haven't bothered to talking to any people who follow Islam. And so I just felt like, and then the more I talk to these people, the more I'm surprised that they haven't had even basic conversations with Muslims. And a lot of the Islamophobia network that has been operating since 9/11 have, like, they've chosen these so-called experts who apparently lived in the Middle East for a little bit and then came here, and now they're experts
Oh,
on
if
Islam.
even. I mean, many of them have absolutely no type of, I would say, even sophisticated amateur expertise. But I mean,
I know,
but
exactly.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's
So
funny because, like, when you actually challenge them, then they are like, then they have no response. Like, then if you start talking about the Quran, or if I open the Quran and start talking about the peaceful verses, then they really get upset because then they're like, they don't know what to do because their whole strategy falls apart. Because they've been condemning taking some verses out of context about the laws of war and then using them against all Muslims.
But
And I
Saba,
just
this
feel
is
like,
where. But this is where. So, and I agree with you. And on one level, being clear, I mean, I support. Everybody should be able, obviously, to have the politics they want to have, the religion they want to have, to participate in public life the way they want to. And it's probably a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing, especially because you're within Republican circles and you're challenging these narratives. You're not, reinforcing and feeding them, which frankly would be a very lucrative and easy position for you to assume, to be the person at the panel in Islamic garb talking about how Islam is a threat would be a great marketing niche. So I appreciate, very much what you're doing. But where I have criticism, I guess, is in two distinct ways. So one is, okay, so I understand from a personal religious perspective whatever beliefs you may or may not have about marriage equality, as an example. But I think that clearly, there is one line in American thinking, obviously, and this has implications for how we relate to something like Islamophobia or religious freedom. There was the Kennedy example, or the example followed by probably more people in liberal or democratic politics, which is that regardless of what my religious or my faith may inform my values, my sense of creating justice, but it is not going to inform my kind of civil view of civil rights in America for groups writ large. So I may have this or that belief, but fundamentally I know I need to distinguish that from how I engage in a civil society, how I engage in policymaking. Now, the Republican Party has clearly, and as you say, they have not made those distinctions. And it just strikes me that it's very hard to expect then for it to be disaggregated, because if there is a Republican figure who's saying, I don't support marriage equality and I don't support a certain, health access for women, as an example, then by that same logic, they may have a bigoted or religiously informed view of Islam, and they may also think that America has a specifically Christian character, and therefore it's not a debate about, a mosque at Ground Zero is not a question of religious freedom. It's a question of the right religion and the wrong religion, and who gets privileged and who doesn't get privileged. And it seems to me that once you enter into politics from that perspective, regardless of what's motivating it, you're opening the door for exactly what you're objecting to. And I will finish very briefly because I'm giving you a lot to deal with. But I think I actually lost her. I apologize, folks. Get right back. Yeah, I don't know. Technology is what it is. And we've been having. I would like to sick Brigitte Gabrielle on our internet service provider because they are a threat to national security and to small business. But let me finish this question because we are running low on time, and thank you so much for your patience. So I guess the question that I was trying to set up was that if you are using the frame of applying a certain religious framework to guide policy that may lead to an exclusion of rights of certain groups, like the LGBT community, as an example.
I understand. Actually, I did
Yeah.
want to address, like,
Yeah.
I support, like, civil rights movements and stuff, and obviously we live in, this is not, like, an Islamic country, so I'm not imposing my views on
Right.
anybody, but I just found it hard for myself to advocate for those positions. That's the only reason I switched. But in terms of, like, obviously we have many members of the LGBT community who are, who have been good friends of mine for a long time and are very active in Oregon politics that know me very well too, that I have been, like, supportive. But in terms of just personally in my, like, as you know, in Islam, it's not allowed. So for me, I can't support it religiously. But at the same time, I live in America. As an American, I support their civil rights to do, have equal rights or equal protection under the law.
Well, and Matt has a quick question for you, but I just wanted, it's important to acknowledge that I think, and I'm not a Muslim, but I think as in all faith communities, there is debate within these faith communities about those issues. And there is, that's not necessarily, I mean, I understand, what you're saying clearly, but it's not necessarily universally the case. But Matt, go ahead, ask your question.
My question is, I completely understand why you left the Democratic Party and your feelings, and I think it's really, there should be more people out there who have the view that they don't agree with something, but they realize they live in a country where that's okay, and they just don't want to be involved with it. That's fine. But my question is, why the Republican Party though? Why not just leave the Democratic Party and advocate for views that aren't with not even maybe independent, or with another party that's more in line with your views, that isn't just so blatantly attacking people of the Islamic faith? It's just bizarre to me that you would join the Republican Party because of those reasons, when the Republican Party is, to me, more so against the bigger picture, which is your faith.
Well, that's exactly what I'm trying to address. But we live in the United States, and we do have, even though we may not like it, we do have a two-party system, like in terms of the majority of political influence. If we really want change, it has to be through one of those two parties. And so, as hard as my road might be to work with the Republicans, to work, trying to get them to stop hating Muslims, trying to maybe, get to more peaceful terms, and maybe getting them to like us, and maybe in the next decade or so they won't be as harsh, and maybe I'll personally talk to every single Republican who hates Muslims and maybe change their views. I don't know, but I think, that's what we need to do. And as much as I'd like to, think that if I become libertarian or independent or any other party, it's not going to be as effective. And personally, as a Muslim, I would love to reach out to all faiths, all groups, everybody, whoever has issues with Muslims. And especially right now, as we face the national security situation domestically and internationally, we need to work with all sides. But at the same time, I personally feel I think I can be more effective in the Republican circles because that voice is missing right now.
But Saba, I guess, I mean, we do need to wrap up very soon. But I think,
Sure.
The other question that I would have for you, there's two things though that are kind of, they reinforce what Matt said, and I wonder, take this in two parts, obviously. But one thing is that I another aspect of that we cover a lot on this show is the aspect of modern Republican politics that is really like a scam, basically. Like the game of email newsletters and inside investment tips and all of these different scams and conspiracy theories and ways of making money off of an inbuilt audience. And it just strikes me that, I don't doubt that some of these people are, their fears and bigotry towards Islam is quite genuine to the extent that that's a positive thing. But I think that there's a whole other market of people, just as there's a market for people with, like Alex Jones sells crazy health supplements. Other people sell crazy Islam conspiracy theories. That there's a market for this in the Republican Party that goes beyond just a genuine, like, it's not on a level. It's not like, oh, well, come and explain your faith to us. We have a market incentive and a market interest in not having Islam be presented in a rational and fair way in the United States. And I guess the second part, I just really briefly, I mean, you're looking at the crisis on the border right now, and we've been very critical of President Obama not, that issue needs to be reframed. I mean, these kids are fleeing horrific. I mean, it's a refugee situation, and the response of the Republican Party is throw these kids back to situations where they quite literally, like, the likelihood of them getting raped, murdered, forced into child soldier situations for essentially mafia cartels is like, that's the likely outcome. And the level of dehumanization implicit in that position is really astounding. So I really wonder, both when you look at the full scale of the kind of scam built around Islamophobia and other things, and just the relentless concern and fear-mongering about the other, whatever that form may take, whether Muslim, LGBT, or a child who's struggled to get here from El Salvador, I don't know how you really break that. And at a certain point, I wonder, if you get so morally repulsed, why would you want to try to break it?
Well, obviously, we do have our concerns, but I mean, the border crisis is a huge issue, and I mean, it's going to get worse with the DACA, and I'm not sure exactly, it's just a crisis that I don't think anybody was expecting in Washington. But I was actually in McAllen, Texas a few months ago. I have good friends there. But we really do need to seriously have a humanitarian perspective on this issue. I think the Pope recently issued another statement. I think the conservative movement needs to look at the Christian values as well. He talked about welcoming strangers, welcoming kids, and providing them with a home, and having a very basic humanitarian perspective. And we need to bring that back to Republican politics, because fundamentally that's what the party was about. It was about the Christian values, and so if that's what we represent, I think that's what we need to do. It's going to take time. I mean, there's a lot of hatred and animosity towards immigrants or anybody who's not in their worldview. But I think more immigrants need to have their voices in the Republican Party, and as they go forward, I think minorities will get that voice with our increasing voting power and stuff. So hopefully it'll make a difference.
Well, Saba Ahmed, we actually do have to run, but I will just say, I'm being blunt. I'm dubious about the success you'll have in the modern Republican Party, but I will say, if they followed your communications advice, they would probably run some more effective campaigns and be a little bit more difficult for us to beat. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on.
Sure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.